Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we are taking a look and installing the Tekonsha T-One trailer wiring harness on a 2022 Acura MDX. So here's our 4-pole. We have this mounted up on a nice bracket, and this is going to be great when you're ready to tow a trailer. So your trailer is going to have lights, and in order for that signal to go from your vehicle to the trailer when driving, you need to hook up to your 4-pole. So this is going to give you your running lights, your turn signals, as well as your brake lights, and that way the people behind you know what you're doing, and it's going to keep you safe and legal when towing. So as you can see, it does have this nice little dust cap here, and that's going to keep any elements out of it, and that way when you're ready to use it, it's not going to be gunked up, and it's going to have a good connection to your trailer. Now this is module protected, so that way if there's any electrical shorts, it's going to be not causing any damage to your vehicle. It has an inline fuse, and so it's really safe to use as far as electrical terms. The great part about this kit is there's no cutting or splicing into your factory wiring. In fact, it just plugs in to your taillights using OEM style plugs that jumper over and send it to the module. So it's really easy and essentially plug and play. Now, part of the installation is getting power to the module, which involves running a power wire from the module on the back of the vehicle up to the battery, but it's pretty straightforward, and I'm going to show you how to do it step by step. To begin our installation, I generally like to take our harness and kind of lay it out so we have a game plan of how it's going to go, and I can kind of explain it to you here. So it all attaches to this module here, and from here we have all of our wires that's needed to be connected. So first off, we have our 4-pole. So this is going to eventually make its way to the trailer hitch so we can plug into our trailer. We have a red and green wire, and this is going to go to our passenger side. Now, these clips on the end here are going to match the OEM style taillight clips that plug in. So it's pretty nice. You just have to pull the taillights off, you plug it in, this plugs into the existing. Nice and easy. We have the same here on our driver's side. Now you're going to notice this one is a little bit shorter, so that means the module is going to live on the driver's side. And then also we have a ground wire here, so we're going to ground that to the chassis. And then this black power wire, we're going to be attaching the added power wire that came in the kit, and we're going to run this to our battery. Now, don't let that scare you. I'm going to show you how to do all of this. So first thing, we need to get our taillights out. To do this, pretty easy. You're going to see this plastic panel. You're going to kind of just peel this back. Now there is double-sided tape along this edge, so if it feels like it's sticking, it might be doing it because of that. Now you should be able to just pop it and hear a little bit of plastic. Now don't pull too far, but if you pull this back just a little bit, you're going to see those Phillips screws there. It's also an 8mm. So if you have an 8mm socket and an extension, you can go ahead and take this one and this one out. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Now while doing this too, there is a little gap between the taillight and the rear bumper. Try your best not to drop that screw in there because you're going to need it to reinstall your taillight. So now once you have those two screws out, you're simply going to take the taillight out. Now there are some pins and they kind of face inward. So you're going to want to clear this plastic up here. And then once you kind of have that popped out, you're going to want to pull this straight out. Now it might give you just a little bit of resistance just because those pins are still in there, but you should be able to pop it out. And if you can kind of get a fingernail or even a plastic trim removal tool, just be careful obviously on your paint, that should pop out. Now if you pull slowly, you're going to see this is the plug that we'll be attaching to. So for now, we can go ahead and push this clip down and separate that. Now there is this clip as well, so just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, we can actually remove it from there, and that's going to allow us to get our taillight off without dangling on the side of the car. So if you need to pry to get this off, you can kind of just go underneath here, and that metal clip should just kind of let go of that. So now set your taillight somewhere safe, so for now we can put it back here. Now our yellow and brown wire are going to need to clip into this, so we also have to find a spot to mount this module. So we're going to be running the wire up, which can be tricky, but a nice little tip here. I have extra airline tubing that we have just kind of around the shop, but you can use a string or a wire hanger or something to kind of just get through there. Pretty much just, you're going to see this big gap down here. You can actually see light through there So just run this down until it's poking through the bottom. And then once you get a hold of that, you'll have it like this. We can actually tape up our connector here, and that way we can pull it through. You'll take your yellow and brown wire clips here, and so what I did is I staggered them, and that way it gives me a little more space, because if you double stack them, it can get kind of wide, and feeding through smaller spaces, it can get hung up. So just run some electrical tape around that, and that way when you pull this through, it's gonna stay attached to it. So during this process, just be kind of gentle with it. You don't want to pull too hard. So if you're getting resistance, sometimes what you do is just kind of give it a few little jiggles here, and you may need to feed it from the bottom just to make sure it's not hung up on anything. But that gap is decently large, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. Once that's fed through, you can take your tape off. And as you can see, these are identical. So this simply just jumps into here. You can see there's only one way that this clip can go. So you see this little notch here, put that at the top part where this clip is. That should clip in. And then this is just going to clip into our taillight. So we can actually take our taillight now, plug this in, drop these kind of down in there. Make sure you have your little clip back on here. And then be careful, get your pins kind of in those holes there. And then once that's in place, you can go ahead and put those screws back in. So we have our ground and power wire left here, but first I'm going to route the passenger side taillight connection over, tucking it up and following our hitch. So now that we've done our plugging in on our driver's side, we're simply going to repeat that same process on our passenger. Now, this plastic piece has the double-sided tape from the factory, and that's, I think, to kind of stick against the body panel. Now, there are clips, they kind of keep this in place, but it does kind of leave a gap once you've peeled this back. So I'm going to go ahead with the little double-sided tape, put it on the old piece, and that way it's going to give it a little more adhesion to that and tighten up that gap a bit. Now we push our clips back into place, and you should hear like an audible snap, just like that. And then where that double-sided tape is, you can kind of press against that. So now that we have both of our taillights plugged in to the harness, I'm going to pull a little bit of this slack, and that way I can take whatever slack we have and give myself a little bit more room to mount this module up here. So I'm simply going to just follow the hitch here and just zip tie this up. I'm kind of tucked it up above the spare tire, that way it's not in the way. And again, just following this hitch is going to keep it in a nice safe spot where it shouldn't get damaged. So now I have my module kind of hanging out here, and before I really put it in place, I want to make sure I have my other connections made. So the black wire, which you see is spliced from the factory, is going to connect to this power wire that was also in your kit. So we're going to just splice this. And also included is a heat shrink butt connector. Now these are really great anytime wiring lives outside a vehicle, because once these are crimped and heat shrunk, it actually becomes a nice waterproof seal, and it's going to protect this from all the elements that you might see while driving. So we'll go ahead and crimp this down. Do kind of a quick test tug to make sure that it's in place, and then from there we'll take our heat gun and cinch this up. So now really all that we have left wiring wise on coming off of our module is going to be this ground wire here. It has a ring terminal attached, so this is going to need to get a self-tapping screw to get put onto the actual frame. And we're also gonna mount this. Now, you can mount it in a bunch of different spots. It's kind of up to you. The main thing you're gonna wanna make sure is that this spot with the wires coming down is not gonna sit up to where water can get trapped in there. So either down or on the side like this. And I found a spot up top here on our impact bar that I think it's gonna sit pretty well. So I'll get that mounted up and then we'll get our ground screw on. So with the double-sided tape that's included in the kit, go ahead and make a good, nice solid contact patch there. Now you might wanna go and wipe this top part down where you're actually gonna be sticking it, because if there's dust or any debris or dirt, that might cause it to not stay on there permanently. So we'll simply tie this up in here. Give it a little pressure and that should stay fine. So now with our self-tapping screw, make sure that ring terminal is going to face to where the flat spot is against the metal. And we'll just go ahead and zip this in place. Again, you can kind of pick wherever you want. Make sure it's just an unpainted surface that doesn't have anything behind it. So quick little zip here. No need to get crazy with the self-tapper. And just tight enough to where that's not going to move. So our power wire that we butt connected here, we're actually going to need to run up to the battery, which is on the driver's side. So this wire will need to run up. And while I run this wire, I try my best to follow factory wire looms, and that way it's going to stay in a safe position. But mainly you're trying to stay away from exhaust, moving parts, anything where this wire can get damaged. So I'm going to go ahead and run our power wire, and then I'll show you how I did it. So again, trying to stay away from any hot or moving parts, I ran our power wire. I zipped up all of ours here to kind of keep it out of the way, and then simply attached to our hard line here on the brakes. Now I wrapped it around here on our cross member. And so I kind of left these little zip ties. I'll go back and clip these, but that way you can kind of visually see where it's running. Ran it over, and then that's going to keep away from any of our suspension or our axles here. From there, I kind of brought it over, and then it's going to go by the gas tank. Now, I tried to feed it over, and that way it's going to stay up and not droop down. So I tucked it up, and at this point, I understand that you don't have a lift to run this wire, so it can get a little bit tricky, but to make it a little bit easier, there's plastic push pins and a few 10mm bolts, and that way you can kind of pull this trim down just a little bit, and you can leave it attached on the other side, because you can just use these little bars to zip the wire. And I just ran the zip ties through those gaps. And then from here, I ran it over, and that way we can start making it towards the engine bay. Now you can see the wire goes through here. Now if it is against any rough metal like this, you're going to want to either put something on here to protect it, or really try your best to not get that to chafe, because over time that can damage it. Now from here, it's going to route up over that sway bar. And to get it up to the battery, what we're going to do is that fish wire technique we use to pull the wires up on the taillight, we're going to be doing on the engine bay. So if you have that airline or whatever tool you used, we're going to feed that down and pull that wire up. So with my airline here that I fed down, I've gone ahead and taped that up to our power wire, and I'm just going to simply pull this up. So here we have our power wire. Now it looks like, oh, it might be a little short to get to the positive, but do not worry, because we still need to put a fuse holder in place. So we'll go ahead and we'll splice this end here. And then included in the kit is going to be our fuse holder. I'll set this up here for now. So our fuse holder here, you can see, is in a loop. You can cut it kind of wherever you need to. And so important, before we hook this up, make sure the fuse is not in there. It shouldn't come that way from the factory, but we're not going to put our fuse in until we're actually hooked up to power. So go ahead and splice one end of it. And then we are going to take another heat shrink butt connector, and we're going to attach that to our power wire. I'm also going to try to route this to where it's going to be a little more inconspicuous and still out of the way. So I think if I run this power wire kind of underneath this box, and that way we can kind of just shoot it out exactly where we need it to be at the battery. Now we'll take our heat gun and cinch this up. Now with the other end of our fuse holder, we're going to splice that off. And then included in the kit is going to be a ring terminal. So we'll go ahead and get that on there. So really, all we have to do now is get this little 10mm off the battery terminal. And that ring terminal will go there, and we'll tighten this back up on top of it. You can see this washer here. I'm going to actually place our ring terminal under that. Now, with this little cover, I really don't want to trim the plastic. If I have to, I will, but I'm going to try to find a good spot for this to sit and not have to trim it. That way it can cap back down. So let's try it from this side. We're putting a little bend here. That ring terminal can sit nicely in there, and we'll still be able to latch that down. So go ahead and hold this kind of in place where you want it. And you can tighten this down. Still clips, it's in place, and it's tucked in nicely. So now, really, all we have to do here is uncap this top. We can now place our fuse in. And now we can cap this up. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to zip tie my wires up just to make them a little bit cleaner, but we're pretty much ready to test our connections and see if it's working. So now we're going to be testing our 4-pole, and you can see here it's mounted on a bracket, and you can pick these up at Etrailer, and some of your hitches like the Draw-Tite will have this welded on bracket to mount this, but if not, no big deal. There's also extended brackets that can go onto your hitch. Speaking of our 4-pole, let's go ahead and test it. So to test it, a lot of times you'll have to hook up to your trailer, which works, but if you have problems with your wiring in the trailer, it may kind of give you a false negative. So having a 4-pole tester is really ideal. And so if you want one of these, we have them here at Etrailer, and this is really nice because it's going to tell the light sequence as we run through it, and you'll know that this wiring is good to go. So we'll simply plug this in, and I'm going to run it through the light cycle and check to make sure these are working. First one being our running lights. Next we'll do our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and then finally the brakes. So now that we know it's working, everything's tightened up, zip tied where it needs to be, the only thing left to do is hook up to our trailer and get to towing. And that was a look and installation of the Tekonsha T-One trailer wiring harness on a 2022 Acura MDX. Thanks for watching.